In the area of a right triangle whose legs are 12 and 7.
Today of being Ivan the Terrible, the sadistic Nazi death camp guard responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of Jews during World War II. The three judges who heard the case did not believe him to be a victim of mistaken identity or that the death camp ID card was a Soviet fake. And they did not believe that the memories of some survivors had failed after 45 years. News Center 8's Mike Conway is in Israel. We'll have more on today's verdict in a live report coming up in just a few minutes.
But there is another top story tonight coming from the volatile Persian Gulf, where the United States and Iran exchanged gunfire today in the most serious clash to date between the two countries. Making good on earlier threats, the United States destroyed two Iranian oil platforms, sank an Iranian guided missile patrol boat, and hit two of their frigates. President Reagan described the attacks as proof Iran will pay a price for aggression against U.S. ships. The most recent coming last week when the USS Samuel B. Roberts was badly damaged by a mine. Today's response from the Iranians was more aggressive than in the past. Iran struck back by attacking an American-flagged tugboat, a British-flagged vessel, several American aircraft on combat patrol, and one of the 6 warships involved in the assault on the oil platforms. There were no U.S. casualties reported, but a Cobra attack helicopter with 2 crewmen aboard has not returned to a Navy cruiser, and U.S. crews are still searching for it. Joining us live now is Vice President George Bush, who is in Cleveland to campaign before the May 3rd primary. Mr. Vice President, first of all, welcome.
Thank you, Robin.
We'd like to know, what are your views on today's action in the Persian Gulf?
My views are that when the United States or international shipping in any way is interfered with in the open seas, and when aggressive action is taken against a United States vessel, and clearly mining fits that description, an appropriate response is called for. An appropriate response was taken, taking out these platforms. Iran decided then to escalate and to attack American vessels. And I think everybody in the free world and anywhere else understands that if attacked, the United States is going to defend itself against attack. And so we have a situation that's a bit fluid at the time, but the principle of appropriate response was involved here, and we are not going to pull back. We are not going to be driven out of the Gulf and thus leave the sea lanes unprotected to freedom of passage.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, we've been getting a lot of phone calls from our viewers, and they're worried that we're going to war. Are we? What can you say to them?
No, I'd say I wouldn't worry about that. It's a dust-up out there, and Iran knows that it would be, they would be stupid to go to war with the United States. And remember, there are 5 allied countries supporting us, and we're supporting them in the Gulf as well. So I would calm the troubled waters in that regard and say experience would indicate that that is not the case.
All right. Now, Iran is calling for volunteers to go to the Gulf and fight U.S. forces, and their message is something to the effect, we're standing firm against world oppressors and will introduce their knees to the dark soil of defeat. Now, does that sound like to you that they're ready for war?
No, not particularly. It sounds to me like extremist rhetoric. And you've heard this out, if anyone's followed Mr. Khomeini and the radical Shiites that he leads, and if you've watched Iran closely, you know that a lot of this is what I would call empty cannons of rhetoric. Now, are they upset? Certainly. But is this going to scare the United States of America? And is it going to scare our allies and friends there? Absolutely not. And I will bet you anything you have, or that I have, that the moderate Arab countries in that area are glad that that principle of freedom of passage through the Straits of Hormuz and passage through international waters is being upheld, this time by a committed United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Carlucci says while the helicopter is overdue for return to base, with a mission like today's, there is a certain amount of miscommunication and confusion, and it's not certain the copter and its crew are in trouble. U.S. officials say the battle that copter was involved in was just a warning to the Iranians. This time, the Americans made the first strike. 2 offshore oil rigs. One was destroyed by gunfire, the other by Marines who boarded the platform and planted explosives. As the rigs burned, an Iranian frigate fired on 3 Navy attack jets. It missed. The jets and a Navy frigate fired back and didn't miss. The Iranian frigate was left burning. Iran struck back again, attacking an oil field believed to be U.S. operated, a tugboat, and an oil tanker bearing a British flag and a Cypriot ship. U.S. officials say Iran should have known it was asking for trouble.
They must know that we will protect our ships, and if they threaten us, they'll pay a price.
The Iranians say now there are no limits to where and how they will react.
We will properly retaliate any act of hostility by whatsoever superpower.
Former President Nixon says it's time for Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev to work together on this.
Should make it clear to Gorbachev that the Russians are playing Russian roulette with this situation there, because this is an area that is a critical interest to the United States and the West. It could explode into war, which could go far beyond this area.
Again, at this hour, the Pentagon says its crews are still searching for the missing Cobra helicopter. Most of the day, the Pentagon reported no U.S. casualties in the fighting in the Gulf. Now, that's uncertain. This is day 14 for the more than 30 people who are still being held hostage aboard this Kuwaiti jetliner in Algeria. And from the outside, the scene looks very much like the early days.
Platforms out of action. An Iranian missile boat is sunk. 2 Iranian warships are severely damaged. The Iranians strike back. They hit an oil platform manned by Americans, an American tugboat, a British tanker, and a Cypriot freighter. An American helicopter is missing in action. All this in one day. Persian Gulf since the United States took on the role of protecting international shipping there last July. The U.S. struck the first blow today, calling it a response to an incident last week in which the USS Samuel B. Roberts was damaged by a mine which the U.S. said was laid by Iranians in international waters. And today it very quickly escalated. The action took place over a wide area of the Gulf, and all of the nations on its edge will be affected, either today or in the future. We begin with our Pentagon correspondent, Bob Zelnick.
Evacuate the platform immediately.
Okay, do you give us more time till we know what to do? We don't have the order to leave the platform. They don't let us.
Evacuate immediately. You have less than 1 minute.
8 a.m. in the Persian Gulf. 3 U.S. warships warn an Iranian oil platform at Siri, while 3 more get ready to attack another at Sasson. Both platforms have radar and communications equipment to help direct Iranian attacks against Gulf shipping. The firing begins. At Sasson, Marines board the platform to complete its demolition. Their job done, the ships steam away. At Siri, the fire is too hot for the Marines to climb aboard. Suddenly, a small Iranian missile boat is spotted headed toward the U.S. ships.
We engaged, and he fired at us simultaneously with a missile. The Simpson fired 3 Standard missiles, 2 of which hit the PTG. The Wainwright fired 1, which hit the PTG. We have subsequently closed it and fired another missile and is sunk.
2 threatening Iranian Phantom jets are also spotted. They're driven off by missiles fired from the Wainwright. 3:30 p.m. Iranian patrol boats retaliate against an American-operated oil platform and set it ablaze. An American service boat, the Willie Tide, is hit by Iranian guns, but damage is slight. An American worker aboard the platform describes the scene.
We're there like sitting ducks, you know, and if I had a grenade launcher or something like that, I'd have fired at them. I would have.
The British tanker York Marine is attacked by 3 Iranian patrol boats, set afire, and evacuated by its crew. U.S. attack jets off the carrier Enterprise finally arrive on the scene and sink 3 Iranian Boghammer patrol boats. 3:35 p.m. An Iranian frigate, the Sahan, with a crew of 125, one of only 4 in Iran's Navy, is spotted heading toward 3 U.S. warships near a rock island in the Strait of Hormuz. Warned away by a Navy surveillance plane, the frigate instead fires at 3 A-6 jets from the Enterprise. The planes respond with missiles and bombs.
All the ordnance appears to have hit the frigate, and it's heavily damaged.
5:17 p.m. A second Iranian frigate, the Sabalan, allegedly fires on another U.S. jet, which returns the fire with a single laser-guided bomb. Astonished by Iran's unprecedented boldness in challenging superior U.S. firepower, Defense Secretary Carlucci this afternoon issued this warning.
We have to assume that war vessels entering the region are engaged in hostile intent.
There were no confirmed U.S. casualties, although a helicopter with 2 aboard is missing from the Wainwright. The number of Iranian casualties depends mainly on losses unknown at this time from the 2 frigates. Officials here express satisfaction that both men and equipment worked well today, but no one is willing to guess whether the Iranians have had enough. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
The Iranian radio and television today said that Iran was at war with the United States. This is actually the first time that Iran has attacked the U.S. fleet head-on. And it must be a sobering experience to have 2 of your major warships, those Iranian frigates, put out of action.